Ron Howard's 2015 movie In the Heart of the Sea depicts the final voyage of the Essex whale ship and the horrifying events that occurred after the ship sank. In the Heart of the Sea boasts an impressive cast led by Chris Hemsworth, Benjamin Walker, Tom Holland, and Cillian Murphy, who each portray real people who sailed on the Essex. The movie details the events leading to the ship sinking, including it being attacked by a whale, along with the drastic measures that the men had to take to stay alive. Despite its gripping subject matter and great cast, the movie was unsuccessful when it was first released. While In the Heart of the Sea's ending does provide some context for what happened after the Essex sank and the survivors were rescued, their stories continued long after that point. Only 8 of the Essex's crew survived out of the 20 who were aboard the ship when it sank, but the survivors went on to continue their careers and some even wrote accounts of the ordeal. George Pollard served as the captain of the Essex whaling ship during its fateful voyage in the southern Pacific Ocean. After the Essex sank, George Pollard captained one of the small whaleboats on which he survived along with Charles Ramsdell. Pollard was rescued on February 23, 1821, and later reunited with the other survivors, but he was too weak to travel and only returned to Nantucket several months after the other survivors. When he finally arrived home, Pollard was greeted at the dock by 1,500 Nantucket residents, via Nantucket Historical Association. After returning to Nantucket, Pollard captained another whaling ship called the Two Brothers, and he was joined by survivors Thomas Nickerson and Charles Ramsdell. However, Pollard's ship sank again in the Pacific Ocean, though, luckily, he and his crew were all rescued very shortly afterward. After unsuccessfully captaining 2 whaling ships, Pollard sailed on 1 merchant vessel and then retired from the sea. For the remainder of his life, he served as a constable in Nantucket and fasted every year on the anniversary of the Essex sinking. Pollard passed away in 1870 at the age of 78. Essex's first mate, Owen Chase, portrayed by Chris Hemsworth, survived the ship sinking in a different whaleboat than Captain George Pollard, and he was found on February 18, 1821. Chase, along with 3 of the other whaleboat survivors, left South America for Nantucket in March 1821. As portrayed in the Heart of the Sea, Chase meets his daughter for the first time upon his return home. Owen Chase later returned to the sea and continued his whaling career for several decades, even becoming a part owner of the whaling ship Charles Carroll. Immediately following his return to Nantucket, Owen Chase wrote a memoir of his experience of the Essex sinking. While In the Heart of the Sea shows Herman Melville speaking to an elderly Thomas Nickerson to gain inspiration for his book, in real life Owen Chase's account of the ordeal was the inspiration for Moby Dick. After Chase's wife died, he married second mate Matthew Joy's widow, creating an odd connection. Later in his life, Chase's traumatic experiences began to take a toll on him, and he went insane before passing away in 1869, via NHA. 6. Thomas Nickerson. The youngest crew member continued sailing. At the time that the Essex began its voyage, cabin boy Thomas Nickerson was only 14 years old, making him the youngest survivor of the Essex. In the film, Nickerson is portrayed by Hemsworth's fellow MCU star, Tom Holland, as a boy and by Brendan Gleeson as an older man who recounts the sad tale. Along with Owen Chase, Nickerson also wrote an account of the Essex sinking, though his was lost until 1960 and only published in 1984. While not truly an inspiration for Herman Melville, Nickerson's account does help expand on an important and tragic moment in history. Following the events of In the Heart of the Sea, Thomas Nickerson kept sailing, first with George Pollard and later on cargo ships. After retiring from sailing, Nickerson became the owner of a boarding house with his wife as In the Heart of the Sea shows. While the movie does change Nickerson's story slightly with the addition of Melville, overall the film is faithful to the events and emotions present in his book itself. Nickerson lived until 77 years old, passing away in 1883. Benjamin Lawrence. Lawrence captained 2 whaleboats after surviving the Essex. Benjamin Lawrence, Indiana. The Heart of the Sea. Benjamin Lawrence was the 3rd man on Owen Chase's whaleboat, along with Chase and Nickerson, who survived. He returned to Nantucket in March 1821 with Chase, Nickerson, and Ramsdell. Like several of the other survivors of the Essex, Lawrence continued sailing, and he became the captain and part owner of the ship Dromo. Lawrence continued sailing until the 1840s but eventually retired to become a guard at an asylum. After the Essex sank, Benjamin Lawrence returned to Nantucket and married Eliza Pittman in 1824, and they had 6 children. Along with his work as an asylum guard, Lawrence also owned a small farm in Siasconset which he tended for the rest of his life. The boat steerer, who had been born on Nantucket, also passed away there in 1879 at the age of 80, making him one of the oldest survivors, via NHA. On the Essex, Thomas Chappell served as a boat steerer for the second mate, Matthew Joy. Following the Essex's sinking, the men eventually drifted to Henderson Island, which they believed to be Juicy Island, where they survived on the island's natural resources for a week. After deciding that they would not be able to survive on the very limited resources that the island offered, the majority of the men decided to venture back out into the ocean. However, Thomas Chappell along with 2 other men decided to stay behind, and all 3 were ultimately rescued.